I noticed her before I even stepped inside the hall. She wasn't trying to draw attention, she never did. But the way she adjusted the strap of her dress, the faint shimmer of light across her collarbone, the calm poise in the way she stood, it made the noise of the celebration fade for me, just for a second. My best friend's sister. Older, elegant, and nothing like the scattered, laughing crowd around us. She was composed, almost untouchable. And yet, when her eyes flicked across the room and landed on mine, I felt something shift in my chest. A quiet, sharp recognition, as if she had been waiting, as if I had. I tried not to stare, but every movement pulled me back. The way she held her glass lightly, never fully sipping. The small crease at the corner of her mouth when someone said something she didn't care for. Even the stillness in her posture, it felt like she carried years no one here could see. I found myself drifting closer. Not out of courage, not even out of intent. Just gravity. When I finally stood near her, the music felt too loud, the air too thick. I said something small, forgettable. A comment about the lights, maybe? She smiled politely, but it wasn't the kind of smile meant to end a conversation. Her eyes lingered. Long enough for me to realize I had her attention. Long enough for me to forget what I was supposed to say next. "You don't really like these events, do you?" she asked suddenly. Her voice was low, clear, carrying an edge of amusement. I blinked, caught off guard. "Not really. Too much noise. Too many people pretending." Her brow arched slightly, like she hadn't expected honesty. Then her fingers brushed mine as she shifted her glass to her other hand. The touch wasn't intentional, or maybe it was. Either way, it burned through me more than the whiskey in my glass ever could. I wanted to say something, anything, to keep that fragile thread between us. But she broke eye contact first, glancing at the dance floor where her brother laughed with his fiancée. "He looks happy," she murmured. I nodded, though my gaze had nowhere to go but back to her. The warmth in the room seemed to bend around us, pressing closer, making every silence louder. She noticed. She had to. Because when I finally spoke again, softer this time, she tilted her head slightly toward me, as if drawing the words in. "You look." I stopped myself, pulse quick in my throat. Too forward. Too dangerous. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, not quite a challenge. "Careful," she whispered. That single word unraveled me. Careful. Not. Don't. Not. Stop. Just careful. And suddenly the space between us wasn't just space. It was charged, alive. I became hyper-aware of everything, the faint scent of her perfume, the warmth of her arm brushing mine, the slight tremor in my own hand as I lifted my glass. Someone walked past us, brushing her shoulder. I caught myself stepping closer, almost protective. She didn't move away. Instead, she turned, leaned in slightly, her breath barely grazing my ear as she whispered, "Step outside with me." The words froze me. My chest tightened, my thoughts scattering. She was looking at me, waiting, daring. But before I could answer, before I could follow her into whatever that invitation meant, the doors to the hall swung open, someone calling her name, cutting sharp through the air. Her eyes held mine for one more long second. Then she set her glass down, steady, her expression unreadable. And just like that, she was gone into the crowd. I didn't see her again for most of the night. The music swelled, people laughed too loudly, and I tried to act like I wasn't searching the room for her. But every time the crowd shifted, every time a shadow moved across the lights, I caught myself hoping it was her. It wasn't until much later, when the hall had thinned and the air smelled faintly of spilled wine and fading perfume, that I found her again, outside on the balcony, alone. She leaned against the railing, one arm wrapped around herself as though she wasn't quite sure she belonged in the celebration at all. I hesitated at the doorway, watching her. Something about the way she stood, so poised, yet so solitary, pulled me forward before I could think better of it. "You disappeared," I said quietly. She turned, and the faint smile she gave me didn't quite reach her eyes. "Crowds aren't my favorite." There was a pause. She seemed about to say more, then let it hang between us. The silence pressed in. Finally I asked, "You come to these things often?" Her laugh was soft, tinged with something bitter. "Only when I can't avoid them. Family obligations." She turned back to the night sky, her profile lit by the soft glow from inside. "I used to think these moments meant something, when I was younger. All the rituals, the dances, the endless promises." Her fingers tapped against the railing, restless. "But most promises break eventually." Something in her voice caught me off guard. "Your husband?" The question slipped out before I could stop myself. Her shoulders tensed. She didn't look at me. "Ex-husband." The word lingered, sharp but quiet, and I suddenly understood why she carried herself with that mix of grace and distance. She had lived through disappointments the rest of us hadn't even touched yet. I wanted to ask more, but the way her jaw tightened told me she wouldn't answer. So I just stood beside her, close enough that the fabric of her dress brushed against my sleeve when the wind shifted. "You're young," she said finally, turning her gaze on me. "Why are you out here, wasting your time with someone like me?" I swallowed. She meant it as dismissal, but her voice cracked ever so slightly on the word. "Me." "Because," I said, my words unsteady, "you don't feel like a waste of time." Her breath caught, just barely audible. She looked at me, really looked, and in that moment I felt the full weight of our difference. The years between us. The judgments waiting if anyone saw us here, standing too close. But none of it mattered when she reached out, almost unconsciously, her hand brushing my shoulder as if to steady herself. The touch was light, barely there, but it lingered, sending warmth straight through me. She realized it too late, pulling back quickly, her cheeks coloring faintly. "I should go inside," she murmured, but she didn't move. Neither did I. The music from the hall had faded, leaving only the sound of our breaths, too close in the quiet night. And for one suspended moment, either of us pretended to look away. The air on the balcony was cooler than before, sharper. She hadn't moved, and neither had I. It was as if stepping back would break something neither of us dared name. Her hand, the one that had brushed my shoulder, hung at her side now, fingers curling slightly like she was fighting the urge to reach again. I wanted her to. God, I wanted her to. But instead, she exhaled and looked away. "We shouldn't be out here like this," she whispered. I leaned against the railing beside her. "Like what?" Her eyes flicked to mine, a warning in them, but also something else, something that softened at the edges. And then, footsteps. Laughter approaching. She stepped back quickly, her shoulder brushing against my chest as if instinct drove her closer instead of away. I caught the faint trace of her perfume, warm and dizzying. Her hand pressed lightly against me, as though steadying herself, and for a split second I thought she might stay there. But the balcony door creaked open. We both froze. It was my friend, her brother, leaning halfway out. "You two hiding? Come inside, everyone's asking where you are." Her voice was steady when she answered, smoother than I expected. "Just needed some air." He gave a quick nod, distracted, and disappeared back into the noise. The door clicked shut. She let out a slow breath, one she'd been holding. Her hand was still on my chest. When she realized it, she pulled away too quickly, as if the touch burned. "We can't do this," she murmured, more to herself than to me. I didn't trust my voice. I only nodded, though my pulse hammered in my throat. Silence stretched. Every second of it was charged. Her eyes darted to my mouth, then away. Mine lingered too long on the line of her neck, the way her pulse flickered just beneath the skin. She took a step as if to leave, but I moved without thinking, my hand brushing hers, stopping her. Our fingers touched, light, tentative, almost trembling. Her lips parted slightly. The night was too quiet now, our breaths loud against it. I leaned in, not enough to close the distance, but close enough to feel the warmth of her. Her eyes flickered shut for half a heartbeat, then snapped open again. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "Then tell me to stop." My voice was barely sound. She didn't. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, caught between retreat and surrender. For one fragile moment, the space between us felt as thin as glass. One more breath and it would shatter. But she turned just enough, pulling herself back from the brink. "You're too young," she said softly, as though reminding herself. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her I didn't care. But the way she looked at me, like she was fighting something just as strong as I was, kept me silent. Her hand brushed mine again, this time deliberate. She let it linger before pulling away, her eyes heavy, unreadable. We didn't kiss. We didn't even move closer. But when she finally stepped back, the absence of her presence felt unbearable. And yet I knew, whatever this was, it wasn't over. The next night, I told myself I wouldn't look for her. I told myself I'd keep my distance, pretend nothing had happened on that balcony. But when I walked into the reception dinner, my eyes betrayed me instantly. And there she was. She stood near the edge of the room, her hair pinned loosely, strands falling in a way that made her look softer, younger somehow. She wore black, simple, elegant, but the way the fabric clung to her, the way her shoulders curved as she leaned in to speak to someone, made my pulse stumble. I didn't realize I was moving toward her until I was already too close to turn back. She noticed me before I spoke. Her eyes flickered, guarded, as if she'd been expecting this. "You shouldn't," she whispered under the noise of the room. "I can't not," I answered. Her breath caught, barely audible. She looked away quickly, but her hand brushed against mine, intentional this time, testing the space we had both been pretending didn't exist. I leaned closer, my voice low near her ear. "Tell me you don't feel it too, and I'll stop." She didn't. Instead, she turned her head just enough that her hair grazed my cheek, and I caught the faintest shiver run through her. "Do you know what people would say?" she whispered. Her tone wasn't cold, if anything, it trembled. "What my family would think. What your friends would think. They don't matter," I said, too quickly, too certain. Her eyes met mine, searching, as if daring me to understand what I was asking of her. Then, with a sharp exhale, she stepped past me, into the hallway outside the noise. I followed before I could stop myself. The hallway was dim, quieter, the muffled music bleeding through the closed doors. She leaned against the wall, her hand pressed to it like she needed the steadiness. "Do you want to ruin me?" she asked suddenly, her voice breaking. I froze. "No. Never." "Then stop looking at me like that." But I couldn't. My gaze betrayed me, lingering on her mouth, the tilt of her chin, the rise and fall of her chest. She saw it, and her resolve faltered. I stepped closer. Close enough to see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her lips parted as though she might speak but couldn't. My hand lifted before I could think, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. My knuckles grazed her cheek, warm, impossibly soft. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, leaning into the touch before pulling back, sharp, almost angry with herself. "You're making this impossible." "No," I whispered. "You're the one making me stay." Her breathing quickened. The space between us shrank. She pressed a hand lightly against my chest, as if to keep me away, but her body betrayed her. She didn't push. She stayed. I bent closer, close enough to feel her breath against my lips, her hand trembling against me. For one suspended moment, the world was only this, her pulse racing under my touch, her body leaning ever so slightly toward mine, the silence stretching, begging to break. And then, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. We froze, caught in the half-light, our lips a breath apart. The footsteps came closer, sharp against the polished floor. She pushed off me suddenly, her hand dropping from my chest as though burned. I stepped back too, heart still pounding, forcing myself to look anywhere but at her lips. It was one of her cousins, laughing into his phone, barely noticing us as he walked past. But the moment had cracked wide open, the air between us now raw, dangerous. She smoothed the front of her dress with shaky fingers, her voice barely a whisper. "This is exactly what I was afraid of." I swallowed, my throat dry. "We weren't doing anything." Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp, wounded. That's the problem. We almost were. The silence that followed pressed in harder than the music inside. My chest ached with everything unsaid, with the weight of her restraint. Then she added, softer, like it slipped out before she could stop it. I can't afford another mistake. Her words stopped me cold. Not just fear of gossip, not just the age gap, it was deeper. You mean him? I said carefully. Her eyes darkened. For a moment I thought she'd shut down, but instead she whispered. He left me for someone half my age. I swore I'd never let myself be humiliated like that again. The confession hit like a blow. It wasn't just fear of judgment, it was the shadow of her own past, carved into her. And yet here I was, young, too young by her measure, standing in front of her, wanting her with every breath. I stepped closer, slow, deliberate. You think this is the same? Her lips trembled. She tried to turn away, but I caught the faintest flicker in her eyes, longing, sharp as a blade. It would destroy me, she said. But her voice cracked on the last word. I didn't touch her. I didn't dare. But the space between us tightened, magnetic. I could feel the heat of her body, the faint tremor in her hands as she gripped the wall at her side. You're not him, she whispered finally, almost like an admission to herself. No, I said. My voice was low, steady. But you won't even let me try to prove it. Her breath caught, sharp, unsteady. She looked at me then, really looked, and something in her broke. Not a collapse, but a crack in the armor she'd been wearing all night. Her hand lifted halfway, hesitated, then brushed against my arm, light as a ghost. The touch was fleeting, but it stole my breath. She stepped back immediately, her body tense, eyes flashing with both fear and fire. This has to end, she said. But the way her voice shook, the way she lingered just 1 second too long before turning away, told me the opposite. And in that silence I knew, whatever decision she thought she'd made, it only pulled us closer to what neither of us could resist. I found her later that night, not in the hall, not among the family. She was in the quiet corner of the garden, where the lantern light reached only faintly, leaving her half in shadow. She didn't hear me at first. Her arms were folded, her shoulders drawn in, as if she were bracing against something no one else could see. When I stepped closer, she turned, startled, then let out a breath. You shouldn't be here. I know, I said. My voice was rough, steady only because I forced it to be. But I can't walk away. She shook her head, but her body didn't move back. You're too young. You'll regret this. Maybe, I admitted. But I'd regret never trying more. For a moment neither of us spoke. The night pressed close, thick with the scent of damp grass and jasmine. Her eyes searched mine, desperate for an answer I couldn't give her, because I didn't know it myself. I don't want to be another mistake, I said softly. Her lips parted, trembling. She whispered, You already are. But she didn't step away. I reached up, my hand brushing a strand of hair from her face, my knuckles grazing her cheek. She closed her eyes, just for a second, and in that second she leaned, barely, but enough for me to feel the shift in her. You'll ruin me, she whispered, her voice breaking. No, I said, leaning closer until my words touched the shell of her ear. I'll save you. She let out a trembling laugh, part disbelief, part surrender. Her hand lifted, pressed lightly against my chest, meant to push, but it only stayed there, feeling the beat of my heart. The silence between us swelled, louder than any confession. I bent closer, our faces inches apart, my breath catching against hers. The world narrowed to the warmth of her body, the rise and fall of her chest, the heat spiraling between us. Say it, I whispered. Say you don't want this, and I'll stop. Her eyes opened, glistening, torn. She shook her head, her voice a whisper of defeat. I can't. And then, finally, she let the distance break. Her forehead rested against mine, her breath shivering against my lips. Not a kiss, not yet, but something deeper, surrender. The moment when walls collapsed, when fear bent to longing. Her hand slid up, trembling, to the back of my neck. I closed my eyes, my own restraint unraveling as I drew her closer. When our lips finally touched, it wasn't clean or certain, it was desperate, uneven, filled with years of silence breaking all at once. And in that kiss, everything changed. No more pretending. No more distance. She pulled back just enough to whisper, breathless, "Now you know." And I did. I understood her loneliness, her fear, her hunger to be seen, and she understood that I wasn't walking away. The kiss lingered long after it ended, like the echo of something we weren't supposed to have but couldn't let go of. She pulled back, breath unsteady, eyes wide with fear and something else, something softer, breaking through. "This is madness," she whispered, almost to herself. "Maybe," I said. My hand was still at her cheek, my thumb brushing against her skin. "But it feels real." Her laugh was small, cracked at the edges. "You don't understand what this would mean. The questions. The stares. I've already been through enough." I stepped closer, unwilling to let her drift back into that distance. "I don't care what they think. I care about you." Her hand trembled as she touched mine, holding it against her face for just a second longer than she meant to. "You'll wake up one day and regret this. You'll see me the way the rest of the world does." I shook my head. "I already see you. And I don't want to stop." Her silence stretched, but it wasn't cold. It was heavy, full of words she couldn't quite let herself say. Then she exhaled, shaky, and leaned forward until her forehead rested gently against my chest. My arms came around her without thought, holding her like I'd been meant to all along. For a long while, neither of us moved. The world outside the garden seemed far away, the laughter, the music, the whispers. Here, there was only the warmth of her against me, the quiet rhythm of her breathing as she let herself sink into the space she'd been denying. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were softer. Tired, yes, but softer. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I said honestly. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." That broke something in her, this time not in fear, but in surrender. She let out a trembling laugh, wiped quickly at the corner of her eye, then reached for my hand. Our fingers threaded together naturally, like they'd been waiting to. We walked back toward the hall slowly, hand in hand, not hiding, not rushing. Just together. And though I could already imagine the looks, the questions, the quiet disapproval waiting for us inside, none of it mattered in that moment. She leaned close before we stepped back into the light, her lips brushing my temple in a kiss so soft it felt like a promise. "Whatever happens, you changed everything." I squeezed her hand steady. "So did you." And with that we went forward, not certain of the future, but certain of each other.